Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the new Escort Redline EX. This is the successor to one of Escort's best performing detectors, the original Escort Redline. And the Redline EX actually offers a ton of new features and capabilities that the original Redline did not. In many ways, it's a big improvement over the original, and the original was a very special detector. I mean, it's even the detector that I use in the intro to my videos, you know? And so in this video, I want to go ahead and talk about the new Escort Redline EX. I've been running it for a little while now, testing it out against a bunch of other detectors, and let's just go ahead and talk a little bit about the detector to help you guys get more familiar with it and kind of understand what the detector is all about. Now, in order to fully understand and appreciate this detector, I think it's important to kind of understand the evolution of how we went from the original Redline kind of through time with all of Escort's other detectors and the competition, and how we've led up to the Redline EX. And the reason I say that is you know, it's not just a matter of, you know, looking at the performance and the features and the filtering and kind of all the traditional stuff, but understanding, you know, why we went from, you know, A to B and all the stuff that happened in between would actually really help you guys kind of understand, you know, the whole process. And also for those of you guys looking to purchase a detector and wondering, you know, if the Redline EX is the detector for you, it's also really helpful to compare it to all the other detectors and kind of put it into the appropriate context, you know. So with that said, let's go ahead and start with the original Redline. As far as the original Redline, what this guy was known for was a couple things. First of all, go ahead and just let it boot up real quick. The performance of this guy was phenomenal. It was the best performing radar detector of its time. It was amazing. So if you're looking for long range performance and kind of the best capability detecting radar at a distance, this is the one to pick. It was also undetectable by radar detector detectors, which was a unique feature at the time. And so it had a lot to offer, but the issue was that, well, the filtering wasn't that great. It didn't have good BSM filtering, and it didn't have GPS for your lockouts and low speed muting, and none of that kind of stuff. You could pair it with your phone for Escort Live integration, but it didn't really work that well because it wasn't designed originally to be paired with Escort Live. Now, Escort was like, hey, you know, we have other detectors like the 9500 IX. This was one of Escort's best-selling detectors of all time, if not the best-selling. And what was special about it is, well, it has a GPS chip inside. And so as you're driving around, it can learn all the false alerts for you around town and begin filtering them out for you, which is really, really helpful. And so for people who are not enthusiasts but want more of a general purpose detector, this oftentimes was a better choice. The performance kind of sucked, to be honest. Okay, it wasn't awful, but it was by no means anything close to the original Redline. But the filtering was better, and so for many people it was a better compromise. Now, what a lot of us were saying were like, hey, we love the performance of the Redline. Can you take some of the other features like the GPS, maybe better BSM filtering, build it into here and give us like the ultimate detector? Take all the weaknesses of the Redline, improve upon it, and that should be like the best thing ever, you know? Here's what Escort did. Well, instead of you know, doing that with the Redline, they decided to start building on this platform, which didn't really have the greatest performance. So they released the Escort Passport Max and the Max 2. It was based on the same platform here. We call it the M4 platform, and this radar detector platform is the M5 platform. Now, the main benefit is it's digital instead of analog, and what that means is it's faster to sweep, you get better performance, you get better filtering, a whole bunch of really cool stuff. But unfortunately, this guy had a ton of problems when it first came out. Everything from the filtering was nothing really that special to they were advertising the longest range performance ever against all radar guns on all bands. Turned out to not be true, so it's kind of an egg on Escort's face for kind of false advertising. There were issues with the detector splitting in half and the mounts exploding and false alerts.
There it is.
This is probably one of the biggest disasters in terms of initial quality control and release and expectations was the Max, and it was actually one of the most hated radar detectors among enthusiasts. So not particularly great, but Escort slowly improved it to make it better and better. And one of the nice things for Escort was the platform under here is actually more affordable than this, so their profit margins are nicer using the M4 or M5 than using the M3 platform here used in the Redline. Now, during that time, the competition was like, hey, let's come out with kind of the ultimate radar detector. One perfect example of that was the Radenso Pro SE. This guy was kind of what we were hoping for in terms of Redline level performance and RDD immune, but it added the GPS, so you've got your lockouts and low speed muting and red light camera alerts. It's got got better BSM filtering. It was kind of the detector that we were all wanting, you know? It was much smaller, as you can see. I remember actually posting on Escort's forum. Somebody was asking, why can't you make the Redline smaller or something, you know? Or what if you had GPS? And Escort was like, oh, you put a GPS chip and a Bluetooth chip and it'll make it even bigger. And I was like, you can do a small detector with a Redline level performance and GPS. They weren't very happy about that. But it's true that you can if you're not using this platform. In any event, it's possible to do this level performance with better BSM filtering and lockouts and all that kind of stuff at the same price. They both retailed for $500. Now, what did Escort do instead? Did they come out with the detector that we were hoping for, which later turned into the Redline EX? No, they didn't. They left us waiting. So what they did actually was with the Max and the Max 2, they wound up discontinuing it, possibly, and this is just my guess, due to all the issues that it had originally. And what they decided to do was, rather than doing the whole digital thing, they released the Escort IX, this guy right here. Now, this guy, compared to the Max 2, has pretty much all the same features. You know, it's got Bluetooth and GPS lockouts and red light camera alerts and all that kind of stuff. Neither of them are RDD immune. Now, the thing is, this guy has worse performance and worse filtering and costs more money than the Max 2 did, which is kind of crazy. So Escort has basically stepped down the detector in all of the key areas, but's now charging us more money for a detector that performs worse than what they had before. So yay, more money for a worse performing detector. Awesome. That's kind of what Escort did with this, which I'm not too thrilled about. The only really improvement with the IX versus the Max 2 was the mount. If you take a look at the mount for the Max 2, it actually has a magnetic mount, which was kind of cool, you know, so you don't have like a button to press to release the detector. It just slides on and off, which was really nice. And there were some issues with the mounts exploding and stuff, but Escort decided to actually upgrade the magnetic mount here with the IX, and it actually became one of my favorite mounts. And the reason I'm talking about it is because it's on the Redline EX too. But if you take a look at the mount, it's also a magnetic mount like this, and it works really well. You don't have to slide it into the back. It's just right here on the top. And it slides in. It's very secure. It's solid. It's easy to take on and off. It's my favorite mount out of any radar detector on the market. It's awesome. But kind of the overall theme is the fact that we have a detector with all the same features except for the magnetic mount. Worse performance, worse filtering for more money. Awesome. Now, what happened in that time when we were waiting for an upgraded Escort Redline? Well, Uniden decided to enter the field, and they came in with the R3, as well as, where is it here? The R1. So these guys became the first detectors to not just equal the Redline in performance the way the Radenso Pro SE did, but actually exceed the performance of the Redline. So check this out. Escort decided to take the Redline. They switched from like a nicer kind of matte case to like a kind of shinier plastic case. They raised the price $50 from $500 to $550. In the same time, Uniden came out with the R1 at $300, so almost half the price, that can do everything the Redline can do, but give you better performance and better filtering, and is also RDD immune. So Escort's deciding to raise the price of the Redline, but not update it, while the competition is coming out with better performance detectors for less money. Not only that, if you've got the R3, like the R1, that can outperform the Redline, and it adds the GPS that we've been wanting. So your lockouts and low-speed muting and red light camera alerts and all that kind of stuff for $400 instead of $550. And so the way things were headed with the Redline, we were like, Escort, why aren't you releasing the detector that we want with this platform, but better filtering and GPS? Where is that detector? The competition is doing it, but you're not. What's going on? Well, Escort has finally decided to release the Redline EX, and here it is. So this is the detector that we've been asking Escort for years, and if it had come out years ago, I think it would have been a lot better. But today, I guess kind of going over the Redline real quick, I want to do a video kind of going into a little bit more detail regarding the comparison of these two. But in short, you've got, it's based on the same platform, the M3 platform, with the same two horns. If you take a look at the back, you can see the two horns. One's for X-band, the other one's for K and Ka band. They both got the same laser sensitivity, which we'll talk a little bit more in just a second. They're both RDD immune, but the main thing is, you know, compared to this guy, this one has the GPS chip. So you've got your GPS lockouts and low-speed muting. It's got Bluetooth built in. It's got better BSM filtering. It's got like all the stuff that we've been wanting from the Redline, except the competition has gotten a lot stronger, and the Redline EX is unfortunately a step back in terms of performance relative to the Redline. Remember, what was special about this guy was this had the best performance available out of any detector, and that was really what was so special about it. It was really good, and we were actually talking to Escort on the forum on RDF, and we were like, hey, can you guys release BSRDR, band segmentation and radar detector rejection, and allow us to adjust that stuff? When they did, that really unleashed the full performance of this detector, and it was such a big deal, and we were so grateful to Escort that people on RDF actually bought Escort a bunch of pizza and sent them a whole pizza party. It was such a big deal, and they posted about it on their forum and online and all that kind of stuff, so it was wonderful when they released it. This was a detector that was very, very special when it was kind of the top dog, but things have really changed since. So now let's go ahead and get into where we were, kind of the difference between where we were and where we are today. So Redline EX, the performance is actually a step back, which is one of the biggest disappointments relative to the original Redline. Again, that's what it was known for. This isn't a bad performer. It's not a low-level Cobra, but if you take a look at it, this is actually a step back in performance relative to the Redline. It's going to give you less range than the original Redline, and we've seen this time and time again. We see this on the different Ka band frequencies. We see this on K band with filters enabled or disabled. Escort is saying that the performance should be the same between the EX and the original, and that if any of us are seeing, a reduction of performance with the new EX, we should send it in for service.
Come on, don't bullshit me.
We're all reporting that the Redline EX has worse performance than the original, so there's a little bit of a discrepancy. The only time I've seen it perform on par was situations where we have terrain-limited courses where, you come over a crest of a hill or around a bend and every detector alerts in the same location. That doesn't really show the separation between detectors. It's more of a terrain-limited thing. But in situations where we do have a difference between detectors, you will see the original Redline outperforming the Redline EX. And you may be like, what the heck is going on? This isn't a complete surprise, even though it is a surprise. Now, with the original Redline, there were two versions of it, not one, but two. There was the North American Redline, which is what we run here. It's compatible with Escort Live. It's got TSR for filtering out traffic sensors and that kind of stuff. And there's also the international version of the Redline, which was sometimes called the Pro A, or the Redline International, or Redline MRCD. It was designed for use internationally. So it was not compatible with Escort Live. It did not have TSR and the additional filters that we needed to filter out false alerts. Instead, it had features like support for the international radar gun, such as the MRCD or MRCT. It had band segmentation not only on Ka band, but also on K band, because that's a feature that's very helpful overseas. Now, the issue with adding MRCD detection to the M3 is it is a hardware difference, and the way that Escort does it, it reduces the performance of the Redline, and so the international version of the Redline actually has worse performance than the North American Redline, and we're actually seeing this same trend here with the Redline EX. The Redline EX supports the international radar guns like the MRCD, MRCT, GATSO, and Stadelka, so it supports those, and like the Redline International, it has less range than the original Redline. But like the original Redline, it also has TSR. It's got K and Ka band segmentation like the International. It's got support for Escort Live integration like the original. It's got GPS and better BSM filtering and all that kind of stuff. So I'll post a link down in the video description to a number of different tests, but in short, you'll see it's just not the performer that we've got. I mean, heck, if you take a look at some of the Max series detectors, like the last test that I did, I tested, the 360 and the Redline EX. The Redline EX was a little bit better on 34/7. I mean, it got beat by the DFR7, which is a detector that's nearly half the price. Well, it is. It's a $600 detector, $300 detector. This guy was able to outperform it on 34/7, and it's also got GPS lockouts and low-speed muting and red light camera alerts. And it's also undetectable by radar detectors, and it's half the price. So kind of ridiculous, But, okay, this guy's not so strong on 33.8. This guy managed to do a little bit better on 33.8, but it got beat by the Max 360. This is a freaking Redline. It should be able to beat a Max, This guy was a little bit behind, I believe, on 34/7, but this beat the Redline EX on 33.8, which is the main thing that I see here. It's not RDD immune, but it also adds arrows on the front of the detector. It's also got your Bluetooth integration. It can display the speed limit on the front of the detector. So it does all the same kind of stuff. It's got better BSM filtering. And so for most people, I think this is actually a better detector to buy here in the US if you don't need the RDD immunity or the MRCD detection. this is actually a better choice for most people, but we've got the Redline EX, so we need to talk about it, right? Okay, so Redline EX. Performance, not a bad detector, but still getting beat by the competition, which is bizarre considering what we saw with the original Redline, but it is what it is. Let's talk about BSM filtering next. I've been comparing it a lot with the Uniden R3. I've been running a lot of times these two detectors and going back and forth, comparing it with the Stinger VIP and a variety of other detectors, but primarily focused on the R3. What I find is that with the Redline EX, it has to have TSR enabled in order to get BSM filtering. Unlike the R3, which can have BSM filtering without having to rely on TSR, which negatively impacts performance and range and reactivity, the Redline EX does need TSR enabled. And once it's activated, it's relatively similar to the R3, but the R3 I've noticed can filter out a few more cars that the Redline EX can't. But the main downside of the R3 is the fact that it's more sensitive. It will pick up false alerts a little bit farther away than the Redline EX will, just due to the fact that it's more sensitive and it's able to pick up cars farther away. I've been testing kind of what I call shut the f up mode, trying to make the detectors as quiet as humanly possible. Like, the detectors have a highway mode for full sensitivity. Redline EX calls it auto mode, or even auto low K, where it can reduce its sensitivity at low speeds or all the time. The Uniden, you can turn it into city mode to reduce the sensitivity considerably, or advanced mode to choose exactly how much you dial the sensitivity back by. If you want to maximize the detectors in terms of quietness, so you do the Uniden at city mode and the Redline EX with auto low K. Auto low K basically takes K-band sensitivity and kicks it in the nuts to where you have wildly reduced sensitivity, but again, that's it's not filtering, it's just a reduction in sensitivity, and you can do this with a bunch of other detectors. It's nothing new, So let's say you do that, and you also enable K-band segmentation. On the Uniden, you can do K-narrow, which cuts off on the high end around 24.200, which means it's going to filter out some Acuras, but not all of them. The Redline EX, the top segment for K-band, if you disable it, cuts off at 24.175, which means it's going to be filtering out Acuras in the 24.196, 24.205, kind of that range. So it can actually filter out all the Acuras, but the downside is you're cutting heavily into the legitimate range of police radar frequencies, so you're actually telling the radar detector to not detect legitimate police radar frequencies, and so it's kind of an issue. I've been testing it because I don't really have a lot of K-band in use here, and it's really risky to actually cut down K-band that far. I wish Escort gave us a little bit more control over K-band segments, but that's really designed for international usage. But for the sake of trying to get the detectors as quiet as possible, what if I just max out everything? So both detectors with segmentation on K-band and maximum filtering and reduction on sensitivity on K-band. Okay, what about that? Well, in that situation, I'm still finding the R3 to be quieter and more sensitive on K-band. So the Redline EX, I'm finding, both of the detectors can filter out a lot of cars that they wouldn't be able to otherwise, but I find the Redline EX to filter or to false to some cars that the R3 was not, such as a Chrysler Pacifica. I found it falsing driving around in highway mode. I could reduce it and drop it down to auto mode. It was still falsing. I could even try dropping it down to auto low K, and it would still false to that car. So even with that, it was still falsing, whereas the R3 was not. I found a GMC SUV that the R3 was filtering, the Redline EX, even in auto low K, was falsing to. So in short, I'm finding the R3, even though it can pick up signals a little bit farther away, the Redline EX will false to more cars, and the way that it actually falses, you'll get this full tilt, panic braking shot of instant on, that makes it sound like you just got nailed with instant on. And so the way that it presents alerts is really not good. The R3, even though it will false to many of the same cars, will be a little bit more relaxed and gradual about the false alerts. It will still sometimes false with the bam kind of alert, right? But it tends to be a lot more relaxed and it doesn't freak you out the way the Redline EX does. And so I'm finding the R3 to be doing a better job at filtering at maximum sensitivity, a better job at filtering at reduced sensitivity, and a better job at just presenting the alerts in general when either of the detectors will false. So while it's definitely an improvement, the Redline EX over the original Redline, it's not going to be the best out there. What about laser sensitivity? This is something that I know is important for some people up in Maryland. In Maryland, they have not just police officers shooting handheld laser guns, but also automated laser with the Polyscan, which is a fixed or mobile kind of automated laser-based speed enforcement system where they have laser guns that kind of scan and sweep over the whole road and are tracking all the cars with cameras, and then they'll send tickets in the mail and they take pictures and that kind of stuff. Well, the thing about those is because they're sweeping like this, you can actually have the option of picking them up before they are picking you up to give you a speeding ticket. So it's possible, if you have a radar detector with good laser sensitivity, to pick them up before you're getting clocked, which is different than police officers shooting handheld laser at just one car at a time. With those, you're typically not going to get any advanced warning, but it is possible with a radar detector to get advanced warning if you have good laser sensitivity. And this is a difference between the Redline EX and the R3. The Redline EX has much better laser sensitivity than the R3. If you actually take a look under the hood, the R3 just has one laser sensor pointed forward and it's kind of recessed a little bit. The Redline EX actually has 4 laser detectors, 2 pointed directly ahead and 2 pointed off at a slight angle to cover in laser shots from the side. So it's got more laser detectors than the than the R3, and so detection and sensitivity is actually better. So if you want laser detection, while that typically doesn't help you avoid a ticket, in that situation in Maryland, it can actually be helpful. And I've seen 1 or 2 people finding the Redline EX was a preferred choice because it can actually help them avoid tickets if they don't have laser jammers, just by using the laser detector in the radar detector. Now, that's a useful thing. For me, I don't encounter those here in Washington, so that's not a big deal. What I find in practice is that the filtering on the Redline EX seems to be a little bit worse, and so I find it laser falsing to everything from Volvos up ahead. I've seen it false to Mazda vehicles approaching. I've even seen them falsing to like new cars that have laser-based, measurement systems for like self-driving systems. The R3 is not falsing to those. The Redline EX is. It may be a sensitivity thing. It may be actually a filtering thing. I think it's actually a little bit more with the filtering because the R3 should still be able to be picking them up, even though it's high in the windshield instead of down lower. And those are, different than police laser guns actually aiming at your plate. So the R3 should be falsing if it's picking them up, but I think it's actually better filtering. So depending on what you need, I prefer the laser on the R3, and well, actually relying on laser jammers, but the Redline EX does have better laser sensitivity. So what about the other aspects? Like the thing, it's got, GPS, it's got Bluetooth, it's got all this kind of stuff. Well, let's talk about the GPS first. So it's got GPS lockouts, and they're automatic, which is really nice because as you're driving around, the detector can automatically learn the false alerts around town for you and begin filtering out false alerts from grocery stores and shopping centers and speed signs, which is really nice. And I think this is a really helpful feature, especially for people who are a little bit newer. You can just put it on your windshield and it does the work for you. It's really nice. With other detectors like the R3 or the Radensos or many other ones, they have manual GPS lockouts where all that means is the first couple times you encounter, these false alerts, you just press the mute button on the detector a couple times and you say, hey, this is a false, learn it for me initially, and then it filters it out for you. Not a big deal, but I know a lot of people like the auto lockouts. Something I've encountered with the Redline, and this has happened to me twice so far, is that the automatic lockouts have locked out other cars around me with blind spot falses. I saw it once where the Redline EX was actually filtering out a vehicle up ahead that had a blind spot false because I just happened to be passing blind spot cars in that same area, and because I saw the similar frequency signal in the same location, the Redline EX figured that was a stationary false alert, which it was not. and locked it out for me, which is not good. What if that was a police officer, you know? Now, another situation I found is driving, and I see, I think it was an Acura SUV, the Redline EX has that signal locked out, which it should not. It should not be locking out blind spot falses. It locked out the blind spot false, but then I kept driving and I exited the lockout zone, and then suddenly it started alerting me to that Acura SUV with the BSM false ahead. So that was actually really weird. So in principle, I really like the automatic GPS lockouts, but it's important to be aware that with more and more cars on the road these days with blind spot falses, it's possible to come across different cars with similar radar-based, frequencies coming out that can be triggering the automatic lockout. So that's something to be aware of. But I know it's a really helpful feature for people who just want a more plug-and-play experience. Both detectors have low-speed muting. With the Redline EX, you can integrate it with Escort Live. And when you pair it with your phone, it can replace whatever low-speed muting threshold you set, whether it's 25 miles an hour, 35, or whatever, with the speed limit of the road that you're driving on, which is really nice because that means when you're driving below the speed limit, the detector will automatically, just quiet itself down, which is nice in the city. And it's also really nice if you're in just stop-and-go traffic on the highway. The detector can chill out for you, and it can adjust this all based on whether you're above the speed limit or not. That's also something that's really cool in theory, but has some issues in practice. It doesn't take into account things like construction zones with temporary reductions in the speed limit, which means you could be potentially speeding and your detector decides to mute itself because it doesn't know about the construction zone. It doesn't take into account school zones. It is also sometimes just wrong. Escort has actually switched providers for their speed limit database, so it's a lot better than it used to be. And I find most of the time when I drive, it's accurate, but there are times when the speed limit is one thing, but it thinks the speed limit is something else. And so I could be above the speed limit and my detector is deciding to mute itself with the low speed muting thing. There's no way to disable this and stop this from happening. If you have low speed muting called Cruise Alert enabled in the Redline EX, and you're running Escort Live, there is no way to say, ignore the speed limit from Escort Live and please just use the low speed muting threshold that I set into the detector. It will automatically overwrite your low speed muting threshold with the Escort Live speed limit, and there's nothing you can do other than either A, not running Escort Live, or B, disabling low speed muting in the Redline EX. So that's an annoyance that I find. As far as red light camera alerts, there's a little bit of a difference there. The Redline EX, I like Escort's approach to red light camera databases is because, number one, they update very often, more often than other manufacturers, and number two, the red light cameras are directional, meaning if you come to an intersection and it's only being enforced from one direction but not another, the detector will know that and it'll alert you if you're driving in this direction but not in that direction, which is really nice. It cuts down on false alerts. It does concern some people because sometimes there'll be signs at an intersection saying this intersection is enforced and your detector does not alert and they think there's something wrong, but it's actually a directional thing. Other manufacturers don't necessarily do this. The Uniden, for example, does not do directional alerts, so it'll alert you when you get to the intersection, no matter if it's being enforced in this direction or not. But another difference that I've noticed is with the Uniden, if you want to delete a red light camera alert at a particular intersection, you can do that with the Uniden. You cannot with the Redline. And so if you're driving down the highway and there's a surface street right next to you, and there happens to be a red light camera right there, you can delete it with the Uniden so it doesn't keep false alerting. The Redline EX, there's no way to do that other than just disabling the red light camera alerts altogether. So I wish they had the capability of deleting red light camera alerts, but it doesn't do that. One advantage that I like over the Uniden is with speed cameras. If you're traveling over speed, even if the speed cameras are off or they're not being used, or even if they are, if you're traveling over speed, with the Uniden, you cannot mute those alerts yet. It's kind of annoying. With the Redline EX, you can mute alerts when you're approaching a speed camera. With the Uniden, you can't. So that's a weird annoyance. So as you can see, there's little pros and cons there, right? Differences between all the detectors, but in short, I think it's pretty good as far as red light camera alerts. And well, yes, it ticks the box. It has the feature. As far as RDD immunity, yes, the detector is completely undetectable by radar detector detectors. I think it's only detectable a few inches away from the Spectre Elite at full sensitivity. So it's not something that's going to be detected in practice. So if you're looking for a stealth detector, it will fit the bill. Now, one of the biggest things is it has support for international radar guns like the MRCD, like I mentioned, which is especially important for those of you guys living up in Canada, like in Edmonton, for example, in Alberta, or over in Quebec, or of course in many countries in Europe, for example. Now, the thing about those is they're very difficult to detect, and you actually need a radar detector that's specifically designed for MRCD detection in order to detect it. And the Redline EX can do it.
Radar.
Now, originally, it was actually one of the best detectors available as far as windshield mounts. You know, remotes are a little different story. There's options for that too. But as far as windshield mounts, it was actually pretty good at detecting the MRCD. However, where is it? You had the Radenso Pro M-edition that was coming out, could also do it. Originally, this guy was better, but this guy has MRCD detection as well. It actually has, this is not it. This is the RPSE, but the RPME, the M-edition with MRCD support, looks like the same thing. So anyways, it's got better performance than the Redline EX. It's also RDD immune. It's got good BSM filtering as well, and it also has MRCD detection, and it has better MRCD filtering. This guy will false to MRCDs more than this guy. So better performance, better filtering, both about the same price. They both have GPS and whatnot. Yes, the lockouts here are automatic and it has Bluetooth, and here they're not. But in terms of just strictly the radar detector stuff, as far as the beta firmware that's being developed here, it's actually looking like a better choice than the Redline EX, which is kind of starting to make you wonder, like, why would you get the Redline EX? If you want long-range performance, well, get the R1 or the R3. It's going to have better performance than the Redline EX for less money. It's got better BSM filtering. It's got GPS lockouts, but okay, well, the lockouts are manual instead of automatic. It doesn't have Bluetooth. Okay, fine. Maybe you want the auto lockouts and you want the Bluetooth of the Redline EX instead of the R3. Or maybe you want the better laser sensitivity, whatever. You know, different detectors for different people depending on your priorities. Well, if that's the case, why not just get the Max 360? This guy has performance that's actually comparable to the Redline EX or better depending on the frequency in the band, because this guy actually is a step back in performance. It's digital, so it's got better BSM filtering. It's got arrows on the front of the detector to help you locate the source of the threat. It also has Bluetooth. It's also got automatic GPS lockouts. So if you live in the States and you don't need the the RDD immunity, or you don't need the international gun support, this is actually going to be a better choice for most people. So if you're like, well, I just want the auto lockouts and plug and play experience, get this with the better filtering and the arrows. You don't need the MRCD detection. You don't need the RDD immunity. But let's say you're like, hey, I do need the MRCD detection. I do want the RDD immunity. Well, then get the Radenso Pro M-edition. You've got better range. You've got RDD immunity. You've got lockouts. You've got MRCD detection and better filtering. You know, like, it's getting harder and harder to justify the Redline EX, which is why once I finish doing a series of videos on it, I'm just going to sell mine. There's nothing really that this guy offers that isn't available and oftentimes done better with a different detector. And so I'm sitting here left wondering, Escort, why the heck didn't you release this detector earlier when we were asking and it was desired, and you didn't have the competition that you do now? Because what the heck? So I'm sitting here wondering, okay, now you guys have watched the review, and let's say you actually, who would be the person who is best suited for the Redline EX? Considering all the other options that are out there, why should you spend $600 on it? Well, there's sometimes like discounts available, and the coupon code I'll put in the video descriptions. For those of you guys who actually want the detector, take a look down there. But as far as who this detector would be best for, okay, well, let's take a look at it. If you want long-ish radar detector performance and decent BSM filtering, and you want automatic lockouts, that would be a big one. You want the auto lockouts, cool. Well, the Max 360 can do it, and it has the arrows, but that one is not RDD immune. So if you want the auto lockouts, you want RDD immunity, and or MRCD detection. Those seem to be the biggest aspects of what makes this detector stand out from the competition. There's other detectors that do MRCD detection or RDD immunity or lockouts, but if you want automatic lockouts and RDD immunity and MRCD detection. Any one of those three things specifically, and you know, this looks like it's a better option than the Max 360 or the R3 or the Radenso Pro M-edition. Well, then in that situation, I think the Redline EX is going to be a good choice. But as you can see, I'm finding it kind of difficult to recommend and say, yes, this is an awesome option because, well, there's better options out there for similar, if not less money, that offer all the same, if not more features and performance. So I think it's pretty hard to justify this detector, even though on its own, it's got a lot of cool features. It's got lockouts and Bluetooth and RDD immunity and MRCD. Like, it's got a lot of cool boxes to check off of I can do this and that. But personally, I just find it to be a hard detector to recommend. And so that's my take on the Redline EX. Yeah. A good detector if it existed in a bubble, I guess, but it doesn't exist in a bubble. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. And there's a lot of other detectors to consider from the competition and even from Escort that may very well be a better option for you guys. So anyways, that's a look at the Redline EX versus everything else. If you want any of the detectors that we've talked about, or even the Redline EX, I'll have links down in the video description to where you can pick up the detector, whether you're in the US or, because we're kind of talking about some international stuff, also for those of you guys in Canada, you'll find links to all the detectors here that we're addressing. The main ones, at least, maybe not every single one of them, but all the key ones that we're talking about here for US and for Canada drivers. So anyways, there we go. I'm sure there was other stuff that we could talk about as well, but we're already over half an hour. So this is just kind of the, I wouldn't say the gist of it, but like all the main key core things regarding the Redline EX and how it compares to, well, everything else. So awesome. If I forgot to cover anything, I probably did, but whatever. Ask down in the comment area. I'm happy to address that kind of stuff. Let me know if you have any questions or if you need any help other picking a detector above and beyond what we talked about here. I've got a radar detector buyer's guide on my website. You can take a look at that for more information. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys' time and for watching all the stuff. And I really hope it's been helpful to you guys. So awesome. Happy driving, and I'll see you guys in the next video.